Good afternoon. I'm going going to play this TikTok video. TikTok play. It's with Brandy Morin, joined with Ryan Sepperson on Real Talk, and they are discussing how. Okay, this is just on theirs. This morning, Brandy Morin says, I joined Ryan Jesperson on his show Real Talk. Here we speak about RCMP Commissioner to Canada recently responding to the First Nations in Alberta asking for an investigation into Premier Danielle Smith's committing treason. The relationship is nearly severed. The separatist movement has eroded reconciliation and the threats constitutionally protected treaty rights. I say it like I see it, unprecedented. She thanks Ryan for the interview. So I wanted to play this because this is significant in the sense that a lot of new Canadians, a lot of immigrants, or even people who've recently moved into the province of Alberta haven't known of the historical context of the chiefs in Alberta. Now, I, for one, I'm not a politician, but I have participated in blockades, demonstrations, sit-ins, throughout my whole life regarding treaty. And again, you have to understand, in order to fight for treaty rights, we have to have a war chest. But we're so in power, we don't. Okay, but we do have our sovereignty that we express. Now, I like this podcast, and I'd like you to listen to it, because if you're new and you don't understand the struggles that Indigenous people, Métis, Inuit, and First Nations have been struggling with when it comes to acknowledging that we do exist, we weren't just found here 500 years ago. I mean, it's like religiosity, what they said, the world was created in 7 days, or even the fact that the world started 2,000 years ago. There's so many people who want to create a narrative without scientific facts or even talking to Indigenous people or understanding the history. So I basically have said things in my podcast about just how interconnected a lot of these separatists have had with each other in Alberta, sort of holding hands with one another, Anyway, I'll play the video, and hopefully, you get a gist of what I've been talking about. At the same time, too, this investigative reporter is Indigenous, and like I said, I'm only one elder who's grown up in systemic racism, but I will play this. I'm just trying to make sure I don't have any interruptions as I'm doing this. So listen to the podcast. Here it is.
Privy to an interesting bit of correspondence, and we've been granted permission to show it today, to reference it. This is a letter from the RCMP commissioner, right? Addressed on July 17th, so just a few days ago, addressed to Grand Chief Joey Pete, Chief Ellery Starlight, Chief Troy Knowlton, and Grand Chief Trevor McCready. For those listening on the podcast in particular that can't see what Johnny's showing us on the screen right now, this will be for YouTube, you can read it yourself, but the general premise of this is what? Why is the RCMP interacting with these Grand Chiefs, these chiefs?
Yeah, so in June, the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs of Alberta passed a resolution asking for Danielle Smith to be investigated for treason by the RCMP and the Auditor General of Canada regarding, her possible dealings with U.S. officials in regards to this separation and the legalities of it, of pushing it while violating treaty rights. And just a couple of days ago, the RCMP Commissioner of Canada officially responded to the chiefs and said that they are currently looking into whether to open an investigation.
I'm not, it's not my role or job to say where this would go or wouldn't go, and obviously I'm not a police officer or investigator. I wouldn't be I don't expect that she's going to be hauled before a court for treason on this, but even if she's not, why do you think that this is so significant?
I mean, it is the only time that I know of that any Indigenous leaders have called for an accusation of treason against a provincial or government leader. So it's highly, highly significant. I mean, that just in itself, sets this precedent, sets the table for how damaged these relationships really are, and how the trust has been completely eroded.
The Premier has said that the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act would be enforced if chiefs block roads or infrastructure. You wrote about this back second week of June. People can read about it on your Substack. Why do you think that was such a consequential statement from the Premier? Take us into this idea. Your headline, they're ready to arrest chiefs. That's a powerful headline.
I mean, can you imagine? You have these sovereign leaders who have rights, who have territories, and they are planning to assert their rights. They are planning to do whatever that they have to do to stop Alberta separation, to stop the proceedings of this referendum. And if so, they said, okay, well, that might include blocking highways or infrastructure. When you think about it, that is also treaty territory. In response, Smith said, yeah, okay, well, we have this Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, which was created, by the way, to, oppress mostly Indigenous land defenders across this country. And she said, yeah, we'll implement it. So, these chiefs have been threatening, various actions for a while. This time, I took them pretty seriously. There's treaty chiefs up in Treaty 8, which Grand Chief McCurdy, is the leadership over. Those highways block the engine that runs this country. In Fort McMurray, the oil sands, there has been talk of them taking action there. Yeah, it's a big deal, but can you imagine the chaos that would break up if these chiefs were on the line and being hauled away in that situation, being arrested? But it also, you also have to think about the relationship between the RCMP and First Nations. And this is one of the arguments that the First Nations used when they wanted, Danielle Smith investigated for treason, because the RCMP have committed to protect First Nations and their rights. Would it be the RCMP out there arresting chiefs should, they decide to, enforce this Critical Defense Act?
Yeah, the optics are tough. And I would personally, just as an observer, be very concerned about that heating up. In particular, if you get almost that standoff between First Nations and separatists. You've been made privy to an interesting bit of correspondence.
So let me give you a little background too. When I was in my 20s, they had a standoff in the southern Alberta regarding the dam, water coming, and this had to do with the Piikani Nation in Treaty 7. Now, at the same time, there was the American Indian movement, and in the 70s, John Trudell and a lot of American Indian movement people who the Federal Bureau of the FBI, like they had warrants out for them, and they came up into Canada, and there was a resurgence camp in Rocky Mountain House that a lot of activists went to, and they lived off the land, and so that's where I forget what his name is. He just got released from Florida Penitentiary. He served like over 50 some odd years during the standoff at Wounded Knee. Now, also, why am I bringing this up? Well, because in 2013, 2014, 13 years ago, 14, that was around the time my late mother was making her journey to the next world. And there was Standing Rock, where 10,000 people came to support and have an encampment. And people from all over the world came to protest the pipeline that was being built Now, the reality of it is, like, it took decades, like at least over 10 years of the Oshotishikoi, the 7 council fires of the Sioux Nation, to make this statement, to stand on their sovereign ground. And again, even people from Alberta went to Standing Rock to help in this encampment. And they had like the military, and it was just, water bombs, and it was like it was really huge. Now, why am I saying this, and why is it important that the RCMP are looking into this investigation, or the threat from Danielle Smith saying that she's going to arrest the chiefs of Alberta? Like the arrogance of it, that for all the gaga and doo that she's got herself into, like up to her neck in all of this. I had recently posted too on my podcast too about just the connection, like how interconnected she, like all these people who, like in the lawsuit with Sutina, how they, like, people are getting on the bandwagon, and whether or not what they're saying is the truth, it's the reality that this is like big news, and rightfully so too, because again, like this investigative reporter said, it's the RCMP is a federal has a federal responsibility in terms of relationship with the Indigenous people of Canada. So again, like I'll read this. A provincial judge has temporarily frozen up to $8.5 million in assets belonging to Alberta separatist lawyer Jeffrey Rath and his professional corporation in an escalating court fight over the trust monies from the First Nations Treaty Settlement. Court documents state, on July 10th, Alberta Court of King's Bench Justice Marina granted an interim Marvilva order against Rath and Jeffrey R.W. Rath, professional corporation operating as Rath and Company, finding reasonable grounds to believe assets could be moved or dissipated to before judgment in the court battle between Rath and Tall Cree First Nations. This order, this Marvell order, also known as a freezing order, is an extraordinary prejudgment remedy intended to stop the defendant from transferring, hiding, or liquidating assets before the case is decided, so that any eventual financial award can still be collected. The order freezes exhibity property up to 8.518. Anyway, it's millions. 8.5 million, we'll round it up, and includes banks or investment accounts, vehicles, real estate property, personal property, and shares, and also it exhibits the use of secure credit, such as loans, line of credit, credit cards. If payment is secured against the property, they have interest. So let's see. This remains in effect until July 15th, when further hearings are scheduled. So even like the timeline and the things that were published that I posted on my podcast is like what timeline to, again with Tsuut'ina law, the lawsuit. So understand this: Marishi and Rath, the leader of the Separatist Party, Rath, okay, with Tall Cree Nation and Sturgeon Cree Nation in Treaty 6. Now understand this too, that even it's documented that Malika Holmes or this Mareshi have had some, just there's some gaga, like in regards to money they've already spent in Kainai on the blood reserve. So there's a lot of people having their pockets in First Nations money that are connected to separatist party. Why? Because you know, I mean, do you trust people who stab people in the back? That's why I keep on saying I've grown up my whole life with white people, you know, who pretend to be my friend, ally, cohorts, and then they stab me in the back. And that's what Danielle Smith and these lawyers have done to First Nations. And like again, this reporter, Morin, she's saying there's a breach of trust. Like, and this trust isn't just like the working, the catalyst that has been powerful in helping our people heal has taken decades, has taken generations of survivors from Indian residential school trying to help our own people, like with Nietzsche Institute, which again, Sam Mareshi was instrumental in closing that institution down because they want to privatize Alberta Health. Understand that. They're taking a fiduciary obligation of the federal government for Indigenous people, like they have, like you say, you have a war chest. Well, we also in the treaties there's a medicine chest. Now, when the federal government's fiduciary obligation, when they sort of try to shove us off to the province, we're going, no, you have a fiduciary obligation because you hold in trust billions of dollars. That's been accounted, that's there because of our treaty rights. And so for the Indigenous people, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, this is factual. So the fact that we've been fighting and doing, like even here west of us on the Nakota, the Stonies, I don't know, it was in the 70s as well or the 80s, they blocked the Trans-Canada. Again, because, you know, nobody was paying attention. So when Brandy Morin talks about the road going to Fort McMurray being stopped and closed because it's running through the sovereign nation of the Crees, that it's going to be a big deal. And I'm only saying this because historically this is what we've been doing in Alberta. So this isn't new to us. But if you're an immigrant or you're an American who's thought that Calgary is a really good place to, you know, put your colonial roots in, I'm just letting you know we've been here for thousands of years. Not 500, thousands of years, okay? So, you know, when the chiefs are saying, you know, she's treasonous. Why? Because she's taking money from Trump. Understand this is just conspiracy, but there's also word that she's been taking money from Putin. Now, of course, Trump just idolizes Putin. Oh, what a great leader. And yet, how dangerous is that man? And this is who allegedly Danielle Smith is in cohorts and friendly with. Again, how much can a person trust someone who stabs their allies in the back? She's had the chiefs wrapped around her little finger, and everybody's saying, no, don't sign those papers. Especially this recovery center here on Sutina. Like each tribe and each of us has a voice. Okay, but here's the timeline like that has been brought down by someone who just posted it again on TikTok. Now, my podcast goes all over. I think the majority of people that listen to it are Japan and France and the States. And of course, there are some Tsuut'ina Nation members who do listen to me, and people in Calgary do listen. But the timeline in 2025, Alberta Health Care Procurement Controversies involving businessman Sam Mareshi came to light through media and investigation. That's in 2005. See, and yet the chiefs and the various leaders who've been struggling to help their people with monies that is a fiduciary obligation from the federal government has been piggybacked by the provincial government, and the chiefs are trying to say no. This by doing this, you're cutting back the funding that we've been fighting for decades, like Nietzsche Institute, or like for the example of her trying to privatize. We'll say it's like a watershed. She has given out so much money to different communities where they have these little sheds, medical sheds, we'll call them, for lack of a better word, because it's a Band-Aid. So if you want a knee replacement, you go to these sheds and you pay, and you'll get your knee surgery faster, rather than going through the Alberta healthcare system. This is what Danielle Smith has set up in First Nations. Now, I'm just letting you know because, when you're thinking about people, settlers, saying they want to separate from what? Like, and that you're really tired of struggling. When for us, just fighting for a penny from our trust fund comes with such controversy. The timeline in December of 2025, the Globe and Mail investigated details Mareshi's deep ties to provincial healthcare contracts and Alberta politicians. And again, this is what I'm saying, the spider web of the network. Now, in my culture, and again, I've got to say that every tribe has a different creation story, different cultural story, different understanding of who creator is. Now, in my mom's culture, which I've taken this on, is Uktomi is the spider, or the trickster, because and so the trick is creator teaches us, that like when somebody tricks us, it's a learning lesson. So this is a learning lesson. So again, like I'm trying to give you the dots so you can use the timeline to connect all the dots, and how even like the Native Women's Shelter, being stacked with non-Indigenous women whose ideology is American. Now understand this. I've grown up most of my life in Calgary. I lived in the United States for over a decade. Calgary is the most Americanized city in all of Canada. So of course there's going to be a lot of Americans living in Calgary because it's oil company. It's drenched in oil. The sweat, right from the stampede, right from the initiation of the four ranchers who helped do this stampede, historical, and the connection with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. Like I said, it's historical. And yet, as an immigrant who comes into Calgary, I think it was in the 60s to the 70s, they estimated 10,000 people were coming into Calgary to make Calgary their home. And I say this with distinction because in Tsuut'ina, we lost a lot of men. It was a cross-cultural shock because our whole way of life was being challenged with people who didn't grow up around white people. And so when I say like Tsuut'ina, we've been around white people, like for me, my whole life, whereas other First Nations, Inuit, Métis communities haven't been. And so this cultural shock of trying to get colonizers or non-Indigenous people to understand our way of life and the way we think is totally different from you, but you're not listening. And as much as the chiefs have written this letter trying to let people know something is fishy about this Danielle Smith in terms of treason. Treason is by getting money from another country, from a couple of countries, okay? And that should be concerning, because why? Maybe over 10 years ago or so, like right now, we're going through a heat wave. About 10 years ago, there was a huge snowstorm in North and South Dakota. This is before Standing Rock, the encampment of 10,000 people. Prior to that, there was a huge snowstorm, and all the electrical poles on the reservations, the Sioux reservations in both North and South Dakota were just knocked down by the heavy snow. No electricity. The Indigenous people there had, there was no way to even get out of their driveways. But the U.S. government even sent the National Guard to help. No. It was all over the world. Like, oh my goodness, look at what they're doing to the Indigenous people in North and South Dakota. Okay, when we're talking about sovereignty and humanitarian rights, the U.S. government sent their National Guard to a different state. Now, even you look at the governor of the Dakotas, who was hired by a company in BC. I think they fired her, okay, because what? She created all these concentration camps with ICE in the United States, and then this one company in BC hires her? Again, what are people thinking? That she has some sort of strategy to fight with Indigenous people because of that pipeline that's going to go through? And all this stuff about the pipeline to get gas, oil flowing. And yet you look at the climate. When you live in a city and you turn on that water tap, where the hell do you think that water is coming from? In the northern part of Alberta, I worked there when I was 29. The money was good. I think it was $75 an hour, even 18-year-olds were making. But the tar sands and the amount of water that they use to get the oil extracted out of the earth, the trees are so brittle. The Indigenous people living in those forests have to at least drive an hour out to get tanks of water to bring back in, because the groundwater has been sucked up by all this producing oil. For what? For the United States to drive cars so we get this climate? The United States has a lot of gumption when it comes to how they're polluting the earth because of why they don't know where water comes from. All these data centers draining water. 3-4 years ago, China was putting their data centers in the oceans to self-regulate so that it wasn't going to drain any water from their lands. And people will say, well, there's a shift. Yes, there's a shift. The United States isn't the world power that people think it is or was or is going to be because of the idiots that they put in positions of power. These old men who don't even have a grasp on healthy human sexuality. That, like, it's a disgrace. It's laughable. It's sad. It's sad that they live in this illusion or delusion of how grand they are when they really are creating a lot of horrible things just in terms of trying to keep their narrative going at the expense of what? Do you know how many, there's so many, the greatest country of missing children is the United States? I mean, you even look at Epstein and all that network with all these people. That's why when I talk about our former chief and the crimes that he's committed, and even now being mentioned in this controversy with Malika Holmes and Sam Mareshi, and the lawyer, Terry Braun. It's hard because, these people were voted in and they established relationships with people in my community. So it's a very hard pill to swallow. Like I said, people stabbing people in the back. Again, tricksters. But we learn from these things. We have to, because our children depend on it. Our grandchildren, 7 generations. And see, in April 7, 2026, the NDP party demands the Justice Minister, Mickey Amray, be fired over his personal ties to Mareshi, citing conflict of interest concerns. Now, even that in the editorials that I've been reading, this Mareshi says, "Oh, I was just, it wasn't professional consultation. It was just matter of fact, just putting in my 2 cents, oh, like, hello. If there's a paper trail, it's documented, my boy, or Mr. Mareshi. I don't know the guy. Anyway, it sickens me. So again, on July 15th, Tsuut'ina Nation files a lawsuit in Alberta Court of King's Bench against the former lawyer over 35 million provincially funded recovery center deal. Provincially funded, get that, okay? For decades, when it came to treatment centers and even developing curriculum, workshops, certificates, graduating First Nations people with a First Nations run institute, Nietzsche, that was funded by the federal government, and the federal government trying to cut down and put this on the province, and you get somebody like Sam Mareshi closing it down. So yes, all this interconnectedness, like look at even the women's shelter. I was on the board before they even built that center on McLeod Trail. And I know all the women who were trying to fundraise, because it's what the United Way. And again, who's putting money into United Way? The Alberta government? And why is the Alberta government playing political football with minorities in the city of Calgary? Yes, minorities from Africa and India and Japan and China, like South America, like wherever the minorities have come through to Calgary, and they apply for nonprofit monies for their community associations, that you have this Danielle Smith putting her cohorts, especially with the Native Women's Shelter, those women, so Americanized, so that money goes to them rather than other nonprofit. They're pitting like a political football back and forth against minorities against each other. And so, when a minority says, Marina, can you come and talk? Tell us about the history. Because we haven't been taught this when we come into Canada. And then they see the systemic racism in the hospitals, of the police, all this. And this isn't coming just from uneducated immigrants. This is coming from people who have their PhDs, who are highly educated immigrants. Okay, so this isn't something that I'm fabricating. I'm letting you know that it's this Danielle Smith and the divisiveness that she's doing to create conflict. She's not in any position to or have the skills to resolve conflict resolution. I mean, yes, she's got lawyers. Shit, that doesn't mean they're there to resolve conflict. They're shit disturbers. Okay, so who are the players? Well, of course, Tsuut'ina Nation, Terry Braun, the former lawyer, Chief Roy Whitney, Sam Mareshi, Mickey Amory, and the Democrat Party, who's trying to be allies with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. So what does Tsuut'ina allege? That the recovery center contract was sole sourced, not competitively tendered. Okay, and again, I've heard rumors within my community, and I said, well, I don't know. Like even our health center had to be stopped. Again, whose tenure is it? All the connection leading to Roy Whitney and his family. And understand this, Roy Whitney has had his claws with his own personal company, with his family, traveling across Canada, selling oil, selling the praises of Enbridge, like to Kitimat, BC, anywhere. Okay, and even the money, like he's taking money not out of his pocket, but out of our band funds. Now that's just, I'm not, like I know, because I live here. I haven't received any money my whole life. Even the house I live in, this wasn't given to me. I inherited it from my mother. The whole reality of like brown nosing. If you have a company and you obey and bow down to the chief, you get contracts. or was somehow he uses medicine man or spiritual people as a political tool, and that he wants the followers of these medicine people, these spiritual, again, fraudsters, in my opinion, to gain a foothold in the electorate. I mean, people say, well, why do you harp on Nathan chasing horse? 20 years. 20 years. What the hell? People didn't even talk to me, and after, like, as the years go by, 5 years, I hear different things. People want to create controversy too, especially in our leadership when all this is happening. And again, that's part of lateral violence. I have no control over it. Nobody has that, because it's in every community when it comes to looking after our mental health. So and also allegedly project invoices and costs will show possible inflated prices, duplicated billing, and other financial irregularities. Like what? They pay half of the $35 million to Malika Homes when they only did 10% of the work. And even where they put the recovery center, where they're building it, is in a bog. They have to build a cistern for water. Now that to me, I'm going, who did what they call it when I was director of education, we had a feasibility study. That's what it is. Who was the company that did the fucking feasibility study to show that wasn't a good place to put that recovery center? And who got that money? Again, allegedly, the sources, like, it was non-competitive. So when hearsay, and you hear it and say, well, there's no competition, I'm going, you trust leadership to fulfill their fiduciary obligation, not suck on the tit of our financial funds, because it's a snowball effect. We get our funds from our trust fund. We have to say, Mother, may I, or the King now, Father, may I. And I use the example of, like, Britney Spears. Her parents had to become trust. And so she has to, can I spend my money? When people say, oh, you live off of taxes. No, this is our trust. Because you're living on, whatever municipality you are on, that used to be Crown land. So do your research. Like even in Springbank before, that was all Crown land. Everything and anything around Tsuut'ina Nation or in southern Alberta or even in the province that has been negotiated for municipalities, even the electrical poles going through roads, has all been in consultation with the treaty obligation of the province with the First Nations of Alberta. All that is historical. It's documented in every tribe, First Nations, Inuit, and nation communities. This is what we're fighting for. Again, allegedly, the former lawyer failed to act in the nation's best interest. Like again, the fiduciary obligation. Like, where was it? A businessman and former chief had disclosed roles and potential personal benefits. Again, this chief is Roy Whitney. And again, his whole life, when I went to high school with him, and he had white kids asking him if he was from Tsuut'ina, and he says, no, I'm Mexican. His father used to wear makeup to make himself look more white. And again, that's not just only one family. There were a lot of people who were ashamed to be Indigenous. Didn't want to wear the fringes or attend sweats, nothing. My late uncle, he passed away when he was 35. Like I said, there was a huge amount of men who died during this huge influx of people coming into Calgary. My father and my uncle were two of them. What can I say? My uncle wore 3 braids. There are certain families, like my brother says, oh, this investigation isn't going to touch our family. And I said, because we don't get anything. And for me, that I've grown up here my whole life, never married, never had children. And again, if I did, they would probably used against me in lateral violence if I wasn't compliant or complacent. But again, too, I didn't fill that role. That's not who I am. And I said to my family member, I said, no, but look, the chief and council paid for our niece's medical bill. And that's controversial because there are other people who are in the dire straits who need help, but the chief and council have made this mandate, no, we're not going to enable the way the former leadership did. And again, too, all that was based on colonial ways of thinking and how to keep, your followers voting for you. So again, all these people like Mareshi, his representatives, even like when I talk about Roth and him being a lawyer, Danielle Smith, like all of them, they're just, like they're admitting no wrongdoing. What did Danielle Smith say to the chiefs of Alberta? Check yourself. Like how many damn times, the word F, how many times have I been around white people, especially white girls, or other people who wanted me to help them with a subject in school, and they get a grade, and the next thing they do is like, okay, you're nobody, you're just a stupid Indian, after I helped them. Like I've been around pretendian allies and cohorts my whole life, the tricksters, and I've had to learn from that. So if I offend anybody, like you all know somebody, everybody knows somebody who stabbed somebody in the back, and how you've had to recover and how you've had to trust people. And so, even with our membership venturing outside, like Lance Miniwounds, he says, I lost 22 million, but I had good investors. Like for him to take on so much criticism for our nation, to defend the fiduciary obligations of our leadership, when some of our own council, our own former councillors, like how much money have they spent with no reporting back to us how that was spent or what they've done with it. I'm an elder. The only kudos I get is being invited into the city to talk. I don't get invited, well, just recently I have been invited to sit in and talk as an elder. But the majority of times is like, no, I'm not a favorite to any of the chief or band counselors. So in previous leadership, when somebody's going to Ottawa, they'll take an entourage of elders. Okay, I've never been a part of that. Never. And yet what? Is it because I have a stinking way of thinking? Or is it because I'm just a crabby old bitch? Or why? Am I so fucking jealous? All the lateral violence and even the audacity for even, Tsuut'ina Nation members to write anonymously of alleged corruption in terms of this new chief and council. When even in the dialogue or the email, it doesn't even look credible. Like for me, I'm just grateful that I've had experience with people, sending me stuff like that about people, especially when it came to Nathan Chasing Horse, whether or not they were fabricating stories. I was able to collaborate. Like I do, really, I'm really grateful that I could collaborate, that when people were not being factual because of just the connections I've had. But what can I say? Like I said, all this in terms of just Tsuut'ina First Nation, we haven't even, I can talk because I'm from here, but I can't even imagine just the reality of what's happening out there with the chiefs I don't know their financial statements or anything like that. The only thing that I do know is that throughout history in Alberta, when it comes to blockades, when it comes to sovereignty, and when it comes for us to stand our grounds, we have done it. We have shut down the Trans-Canada, the one that goes right from Calgary to BC. We shut that down. Now, all this, if they shut down that road going to Fort McMurray, like what's that going to be like? You know, they say, oh, well, you know, like there's the RCMP. Well, the RCMP now is investigating Danielle Smith and all her cohorts. This paper trail, this money trail. Like my childhood friend says to me, Marina, the Globe and Mail or any newspaper, and even CBC, they would not publish anything unless they had lawyers to consult. You know, because they're not going to just chase after a story out of hearsay. That's why, for me, I'm just voicing my opinion, and anybody who sends me email or anything, I have no lawyers, and obviously they don't have any lawyers. I'm just going by my gut feeling and saying, look, this is the protocol and how law is, and the evidence that you need in order to report a sexual assault. Or for that matter, if you know, it's got to come from the victim's mouth, not by hearsay by anybody, because it's a learning process, and it's a healing process, and the reality of just how horrible, and how deviant sexual behavior is, not just in Indigenous people, Inuit, First Nations, Métis. It's all over the world. It's all over the world, and that's why when this young white woman, bless her heart, yells out to Danielle Smith, take your fascist pancakes, it made, you know, like she's become a trend, a social trend, a meme, they call it, right? Just like when that buffalo tossed that elderly man, it became a meme. And I don't mean to make it sound like any blockades or anything that the chiefs of treaties of Alberta are going to become memes. I'm just saying that from my own experience and my understanding of how hard it's been for the people who came before me to sacrifice their hard-earned money, their hard-earned work. They're at the front lines. I mean, my mother would do home visits and dogs would attack her, and she'd still go. She'd still go and talk to people about alcohol and drug addiction. The very foundation of Nietzsche and the mental health, like everything and anything that anybody does isn't perfect. It isn't. I've had controversy my whole life, even when I helped my mother establish the first detox treatment center in Sutina. The board, who was Sutina, didn't like it, and so they sent people from Nietzsche, and those two consultants, they were womanizers. The one guy, I had my aunt come with me down to the International Hotel downtown because this guy the two men wanted to interview me in the hotel room. I get there, making sure my aunt is in the lobby, and the guy sends his cohort out, and he starts making a play for me. Why? Because of lateral violence, whatever gossip people had created about my sexual life? For what? I voluntarily did the work to do all the budgeting, investigation, research to get that money over. I forget how much money I was able to get. And again, too, all this has to do with the federal government and monies trying to help, because it's a fiduciary obligation. It's the responsibility of the federal government. So that's why, even when people say, oh, yeah, there's a nude beach on Sutina, they don't even say Sutina, they say Calgary. And I'm going, no, that's Sutina. That's land under, that's still debatable. That's still Sutina. And yet you're saying it's Calgary? And then I get mansplained by some Yahoo telling me that I don't know, I'm so uneducated and I don't understand, this is a municipality and we have a right to have a nude beach. And he says, I don't even go to that nude beach. And I'm going, why are you even making it an issue? Everybody knows this is Tsuut'ina land. This is Crown land. You have no say on it. If you're complaining, get a lawyer. You know, I mean, the whole idea is that for me, and I hope a lot, I'm really hoping people are listening, immigrants, and especially if you're from the United States, but you understand this. My whole life, I've had to fight. Calling me wagon burner, bitch, whatever. Even in school and university, having, you know, little graphic notes left in the printer for me to see. Burn in hell, bitch. Stealing my educational material from my own studio. Like even you know, just the whole nature of me standing my ground. You know, the controversy of what I've done in terms of raising the red flag about Nathan Chasing Horse is nothing. Yes, it's part of the whole systemic racist construct that I was born into. But damn it, I had really good parents and really good grandparents on both sides. You know, and I've had a lot of people who I've grown up with, who I've helped bury, who had strong voices, who were educated and smart, intelligent. And for, you know, whatever we struggle with in terms of our addiction, our central nervous system, our human sexuality, we're human. We're human beings just trying to get along in this world. And with this world being so small now, 8 billion people. That's why, you know, every second we live is precious. Because any second, an atomic bomb could explode. Let's just say one explodes, all of a sudden 3 others explode in the same area. The impact of that on our environment is similar to an asteroid hitting us that wiped out the dinosaurs. Like even the whole construct of even how that happens. Like we think we're so advanced. We think we're so fucking advanced that if, you know, an atomic bomb came, that, you know, just like Israel has this dome, that the United States has this invisible dome that if anybody threw an atomic bomb in the United States, that, you know, like, oh, they'll deflect it off into the atmosphere. That's bullshit. You know, all that anybody has to do, like if Putin really wanted to cause shit in the Americas, all he has to do is get an atomic bomb at what do they call that? Yellowstone National Park with Old Faithful. Any country, any world country that has an atomic bomb that wants to destroy the United States, that's all they have to do. Super volcano. That volcano will erupt. It'll reach as far north as me. Like right now with the smoke here and how I'm trying to struggle just to be alive. Do you know in Europe, people over the age of 70 have died? Over 10,000 people have died from this heat. And here we are, you know, just like, oh, we have this woman in power because she's got all these cohorts that have been, again, who is really running Alberta? Just like you look at the United States, who is really running the United States? I'm telling you, when the chiefs say, you know, charge her with treason, show the money trail. Has the money trail come from Putin? Trump's hero? Think about it. You know, does Putin really want to send an atomic bomb to Yellowstone? Think about it. This whole dominance of the world and trying to get control over people's lives, people's livelihoods, people just wanting to live because you feel like you're a Superman in the Marvel comics or something, that you're the second coming of Christ. I mean, geez, when you have a leader in the United States having artificial intelligence creating a facade of how powerful he is, you know, it's incredible that the United States has fallen so far from. I shouldn't laugh. I was 12 years old, I think, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And the fact is, like, if he wasn't assassinated, what the world would have been like. Especially when they were trying to stop Israel. And look at the clause that Israel has in the United States and around the world. You know, I mean, you can say whatever you want if you're Catholic or Muslim, you know, or just a spiritual person or atheist, whatever. You know, the reality of how powerful and influential a leader is. My mother said that when they announced in the market square that John F. Kennedy was assassinated, she says all the Indians just fell to the ground and started kneeling, and they were praying, you know, bowing their heads down to the ground, praying that the atomic bomb wouldn't be dropped on India. You know, that was when I was around, like I said, 10, 12. Because, you know, I mean, when people say, well, Marina, you know, were you ever ashamed to be Indigenous? Look, I'm grateful that my father and mother went to Machu Picchu in South America and saw all the poverty, all the, like, just the filth of how, you know, people were living, and just the chaos. Like I mean, again, you know, you have everything happening now, and this is like 50 years of progress. 50 years of progress is nothing compared to the lost civilizations of Machu Picchu, of Egypt, of China, all over the world. And yet, here we are, supposedly civilized and quite advanced, thinking, oh, what a good human being I am. And yet the whole concept of evolution, it has been just denied, as if, you know, you have a religion that's going to go through this metamorphosis of human evolution, when really it's individuals all over the world that are evolving. I always talk about collective and holistic ways of approaching, like we're in an ant pile. And that's where we're going to in terms of evolution. This whole network of the world being so small and there are 8 billion people, and how we just network, and how things that happen shifts everything in the population, the way we think and how we digest information, and what we produce from the information that we were given. Now, that's why I talk about childhood and teenagers and development, human development. A lot of my understanding of human development starts at a very young age. And a lot of the perversion and the problems with behavior in terms of not spotting people, not identifying people at a very young age, whose fault is that? Whose fault is it? We're all tribal people. And every society, every walk of life has had those safeguards in their cultures, in their communities. So when people look at Indigenous people and think of us as like, oh, like, why didn't they know? How come this lasted so long? It didn't last that long. Look at Trump. He's what, 80? You know, it's not something that just evolved overnight or in 10 years. This is, every human being is an evolution of a behavior that started when they were as children. And the consequences of who they are and what they are, or what we've become, is our responsibility, our own fiduciary obligation to ourselves. But at the same time, too, I want to reiterate this thing, patriarchy. You know, I took art history, and, you know, like I grew up seeing my grandmothers. Those are my mom's aunties. And my dad's aunties. I saw the matriarchy. I saw how they took care of my mom and my dad. These are matriarchs. And just the whole notion of women raising their children, like by age 5, they were set in stone. I am set in stone. My name was Hapan. I'm the second oldest in my family. When I went to school at age 5, I had a white woman looking down at me as a child, a baby, telling me that my Indian name was Hapan and my Christian name was Marina. I was already set in stone. It was my character, my whole personality was already set. So that's why I try to look at immigrants and people that I've never met. And I know whatever culture you've come from and all the, what do they call it, protocols of your culture, those have been there to protect women and children. As diverse and as misunderstood as it is for everybody, it's the reality. We're evolving. We have to. We have to, because if we don't, we're not gonna last. And for me, when people ask me things like that, I'm going, no. Like my white friend, she's always saying, I wish Trump would die, and I'd say, don't say that. Or somebody says, well, I wish that guy that you like, I wish he would divorce, and I said, don't say that. I said, don't say things like that, because that's, those are hung prayers. You don't want to think bad about other people. So again, you embrace whatever thoughts you have. Talk to Creator and the grandfathers and grandmothers in why you want that embraced, that energy embraced, because you're embracing humanity. And then again, you want to release whatever is holding you back, or whatever people had thought. And, because you don't want that energy to come to your friend or to yourself. So you say, like, I release it. So whatever struggle, what they call it now, when you're really struggling, those are what I'm saying. We all have moments in our lives where we're really struggling. And for me, I'm just grateful that I've lived in a life that my struggles have been manageable. A lot of children haven't done that. And like my childhood friend says, Marina, there are thousands of Indigenous children. Thousands. And like I talk about children in Gaza, and I look at my own parents and my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and I look at the genocide, and I'm saying, I'm the voice. I'm the product of this genocide, and look at how I'm trying to use my voice. This is after how many years? 500 years. Like, I'm 74. What was my great-grandmother? How many years of colonization? Again. The 1800s, even the 1700s, when most of the land in the United States was still Indigenous. Like, how fast does 50 years go by? It's a drop in the bucket. But yet, look at what's happened. Our forests are on fire. The majority of the population doesn't really give a damn about driving a car or polluting the earth, or living off the land, or even farming, or the amount of money that I could have saved if I had planted my garden is phenomenal. And that's just me, because the prices of food is outrageous. And again, it's going to get harder. And again, there are going to be people who are going to be struggling just to make the rent, mortgage, whatever. I know, I have family members who don't live in First Nations, Inuit, or Métis communities. Like, I'm saying, off the land. Because, like, look at Calgary. There's, 40,000 Indigenous people from across Canada living in the city. So, people who are immigrants, you've met people like myself. And hopefully, as each new generation comes to fruition, that this history and this legacy of just how dynamic the civilizations in the Americas were and still are. Because when shit hits the fan, what happens? This pile of ants comes together to rebuild their ant pile. Talk about evolution and what spirituality means. These things have been handed down for thousands and thousands of years. And, whatever product we did have, especially the Great Sioux Nation, the Oshati-Shakoi, the 7 council fires of the Sioux Nation, and the rituals and protocols that preserved and created a huge bloodline, a unique bloodline. Who did this? Our ancestors, our grandfathers, our grandmothers, creators' will being done for everybody. That's who moves us. That's who gives us direction so that we move together as one organism. It's evolution. If you can understand that and you get the gist of it, and you understand, like when you have somebody trying to throw a rock into a calm pond, a calm water, then you wonder, why was it created that way? So yes, Daniel Smith is the rock in the quiet cave pond causing ripples, and there's Wrath and Mareshi, Malika Holmes, all of these constructs. And I'm pretty sure there are other people that are like other minorities who are dealing with different lawyers and different connections with this province to privatize Alberta healthcare that have affected minorities, not just First Nations, Inuit, or Métis communities. It's called systemic racism. So I hope, like I said, the majority of people who listen to me, some are from France, some from Japan, a few from India, not India, well, yeah, India too, but most, like I'll say, the United States. And if I can do a podcast that makes sense to you and gets you thinking about exactly what it is and who we are as we're all related. There's this connection with the whole world. And I don't know if people are ready to even hear it, because it's taken me a lifetime of a lot of, distrust, people stabbing me in the back. But for every trickster, I've learned something. And that's why I say, don't give up hope. If you've been traumatized and you feel like you just don't want to walk this earth, there are invisible helping hands out there. And I hope my voice is an invisible helping hand that sort of connects you to other invisible helping hands and creates a ripple. So that being said, I'm just grateful for this day, and I'm just grateful I have an air conditioner. I shut it off once in a while. I just put it on a little bit to cool, and then I'm back into the heat. So stay healthy, keep hydrated, wear sunscreen, wear a hat. If you have an umbrella, and if you're over 70, wear a mask. Okay, I just wanted to share that TikTok with Brandy Morin. She's on YouTube, and the same with that fellow that she was talking with. What's his name now? Here I am. I didn't put his name down. Okay, but anyway, that's... I know I'm going to go on and on and on, and I have the tendency to do that, which again, I'm going, oh no. But let's see here. Come on. Okay. As a matriarch, I know I'm going over my hour, but this again too is part of why I do what I do. From displacement to resurgence. Understanding the historical impacts and displacement of colonialism on Indigenous women. Historical journey through 5 periods. This is for all you immigrants or Americans in the United States who deny matriarchy. Agrarian societies, the traditional roles and status of Indigenous women. That's one period. Another period that came in was trade, kinship, betrayal, Indigenous women in the fur trade era. Okay, another period, treaty era, the exclusion of Indigenous women from negotiations. Another one, Indian Act era, the legislation, discrimination and its consequences. Like, again, women could not marry who they wanted. They'd lose their status. They'd lose every connection. They died because they didn't have their matriarchs to help in childbirth or even child rearing. Modern era, advancing women's rights and ongoing challenges. So, the whole reality of women, like just the history of leadership and strength from like Indigenous people, Indigenous women. That's why, like, even when you have women from all over talking about lateral violence and just what they've lost and why people are so bitter to each other because of this legacy, these different periods of how we evolved to who we are today. It's not something fabricated out of a Wild West show or a circus or traveling medicine man selling snake oil. These things that have happened. Like I said, one of my great grandmothers, she died when she was being attacked, and she was pregnant. She fell on her knife. She was fighting. Understand this: there were women who fought in the Battle of Little Bighorn, Indigenous women. Even Japan, they had samurai, female samurai. I don't know why the world cannot see Indigenous women as being strong. I know. I've been around women who have, when it comes to family violence, have beaten up their spouses. Now, all that, like there's so much too, like even hunting, like the whole nature of getting the state of Minnesota, all the Indigenous people out of there. Lincoln, put out a bounty on Sioux heads. They created a town in South Dakota just strictly for bounty hunters. And those bounty hunters, their favorite target were women, pregnant Indigenous Sioux women, where they would kill the Sioux woman and gut the baby out of her and scalp the baby as well. So they'd had 2 scalps. Yeah, a town was made like that. But do people know these things? I did an art show at the Glenbow Museum with regards to the 38 Sioux men who were hung. And the vest that one of the Sioux men had, beautiful beaded vest, he gave to a jailer. So the jailer could give him some tobacco so he could prepare for his death the next morning. So that vest is at the Glenbow. And there was a millionaire who bought all these Indigenous artifacts and sort of legacied it to the Glenbow. Okay, and part of them too was this huge panel of canvas, huge roll of canvas, probably 10 feet, and I don't know how many feet along, wide, and everything. And that canvas traveled. There were various canvas rolls. They traveled throughout the United States and Canada at different rodeos, white carnivals, where they would churn that canvas, and you'd see the depiction of what they call the savage beasts, like how uncivilized we were, even in terms of cannibalism. Oh my goodness. White people, use your history. Greeks, what do they say? They ate people. The Greeks ate people, like what the Parthenon. Under all that, there's a child that they ate. They buried the child under that temple. Throughout history, again, say what you weigh. There's different factions and people all over the world having different little, whatever things that they did in life. This is part of the human condition. But the reality of it is, like, they took this and they really did it to take the land because, again, divine destiny, unless you're religious, you don't own nothing. You're not civilized, so we can take whatever away from you. And they use that as propaganda throughout the 1800s. So, things like that, propaganda, and then even now with Daniel Smith asking the chiefs to check themselves. Throughout my life, I repeat again, I've had white friends that I've helped in studying, helping them, like in study groups, who stabbed me in the back. And when I challenge them, it's that same narrative. Go check yourself, Marina. You have anger problems. You have issues. Like, it's such an easy cop-out. It's such an easy cop-out to not be able to stand up to my challenge. To not stare, to not be with me. To not share space with me. Like, it's only convenient for you. And yet when shit hits the fan and you need to be there to bear witness with me, the injustice, that the majority of people cannot do that. So, the only person in my life who has stood beside me to bear the injustice of Nathan chasing horse. Like, I tried to do my podcast to say, like, this is how bad it is. For decades, and even after Nathan was arrested, just to try and have someone stand with me to bear witness that this was an injustice. So yes, I'm going to do my podcast. Yes, I'm going to talk about things that happen in my community. And if I can and influence people to continue fighting for your right to have an opinion, to have a voice, and to help you heal in that process, then I'm grateful. Because if I couldn't do this, that means I'm not grateful for the ally and cohort who bore witness with me. I know he made comments with me, and I said, I understand. But what I was trying to say is, like, I understand what you're doing for me. You've done this for other people. You bore witness to injustice of other people. This is a great thing you do, I said to him. I'm just really grateful that I had the opportunity to talk to him this way. And so, hopefully with my podcast that you're listening from whatever parts of the world you're listening to, and understand that being a cohort and an ally without stabbing the individual in the back means you follow right from the challenge of being like what they call it, conflict resolution. That's a challenge. Agreeing to disagree and agreeing to participate. And then to hold space. It's one thing to hold space, but then when you're being critical and saying, well, try this, and if it's offensive, and you back away, then what are you doing in terms of bearing witness to the injustice? It all plays a whole impact into how a human being thinks about who they are and what they represent. So there are good people out there from different countries, different walks of life. I know it's been a hard road for me because I just didn't see anybody doing that for my parents or my grandparents. As much as they named Crowchild Trail after my grandfather, I try not to say anything when I go to meetings with immigrants. But as soon as I say who my grandfather is, all of a sudden the narrative changes. So I try not to say anything. I just know it's been a long road of healing that I've had to go through. And for all my siblings and cousins, like, they just being there. When I talk about collective and holistic ways of doing things, that's what I'm talking about. I did my DNA, and again, like I said, I'm part of the Ashate Shakowi. It's in my DNA. I know I have over 7,000 relatives throughout Canada and the United States. like I usually know my first and second cousins. That's traditional. A lot of our young people don't know though, don't even know their first cousins or their second cousins. But for me, even having connections and knowing that my bloodline and the ancestors that belonged to that Oshati like in the late 1800s, in the time of Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. Like though that's just that like I said, my grandfather would have been a teenager. If Sitting Bull had lived, he would have been an elder, and my grandfather would have been a teenager. This isn't long ago. You know, even though I say, well, 500 years ago, you know, the first 100 years they killed 5 generations of our children in the Americas because of disease, and even how these civilizations over a period of 400 years were just eaten up by the Amazon rainforest or the fields of the fields in the United States where trees grew and covered up everything because they died off. They killed us. Generations. In no time in humanity, in the world. And yet, is that what makes America great? Think about it. If we keep on thinking like this, we're going to end up being extinct. Think about it.